Usually before these talks we do a little chant. Maybe we can do it as we usually do with the chant. この場で話する前にはいつも戒教芸という短いお経を唱えるので、今日もそれを唱えてから始めたいと思います。無常人人未明法約千万語難遭遇我根検問特十字願言如来真実義無常人人未明法約千万語難遭遇我根検問特十字願言如来真実義無常人人未明法約千万語難遭遇我根検問特十字願言如来真実義。今回のこの天蔵のリトリートは本当は、このような講義は予定していなかったんですけれども、ゆいしんさんはどうしても話してくれというから、本当だったらゆいしんさんが喋りたそうな顔してるけれども、まあ一応私が、天蔵リトリートだったので、禅寺における、天蔵についてちょっと話をさせてもらえばと思います。I didn't actually plan to give such a talk during this Tenzo retreats, but according to Yushin-san, some people thought it would be a good idea. So I would like to say a little bit about the Tenzo, the Zen cook. この天蔵ですけれども、ちょっと珍しい変わった書き方をしますけれども、That's how you would write 天蔵 with Chinese characters. この天蔵について、道元禅師が天蔵教訓という、書物を今から800年前、書いていますけれども、おそらく他の仏教の宗派でこの天蔵、要するに料理をする人について特に言われてないし、これが大事な修行だとは考えられてないんですけど、天蔵は禅寺においてはとりわけ重要なポストだと思われてますし、この天蔵の修行は、本来なら1日24時間修行ですけれども、その中で道元禅師が特に料理をするということに、着目して天蔵教訓を、書いているわけです。So this is how you write Tenzo in Chinese characters. As far as I know, other Buddhist schools have no special teachings regarding the cook. It's as far as I know, it's only in Soto Zen that Dogen Zenji wrote the Tenzokyokun, the instructions for the cook, which focus on the practice of cooking. In Zen, of course, seated meditation, Zazen, is at the core of our practice, but the whole 24 hours of the day are considered to be practice. But Dogen Zenji in the Tenzokyokun focuses especially on the aspect of cooking. ですから私たちもこの安泰寺では、まあ2年に一遍ぐらいの割合でこの天蔵教訓を冬の勉強の、機会で読んでいるんです。春から秋までも、まあ、5日ごとに消防現像随文記を勉強しているんですけれども、冬は3ヶ月間雪に埋もれて、外で作業する機会がないので毎日勉強会を開いています。天蔵教訓はだいたい2年に一遍ですね。その他には同じ道元禅師の知事真偽を読んだり、弁道話を読んだり、学道余人集というものを読んだり、過去には、ダマパッダというパリ経典を読んだこともありますけれども、まあ、これは結構、よく昔から安泰寺で勉強してきているテクストですね、天蔵教訓。We read the Tenzokyokun, the instructions for the cook in Antaiji quite often. From the spring to the autumn, we don't have much time for study. Although we do, every 5 days, we study the Shobogenzo Zuimonki, which is also an important text written down by one of Dogen's students. But during the winter, because we're surrounded by snow, sometimes it piles up for 3 or 4 meters, especially under the roof, so sometimes you can't see anything from the windows. We don't go outside much. And instead of outside work, we have Dharma study in this room every day in the morning. And every 2 years or so, we study the instructions for the cook. During the other years, we study things like Chishi Shingi, which is also a text by Dogen, where he talks about the other temple administrators, or Bendowa, which is on Zazen, or Gakudo Yojinshu, or we also in the past studied the Dhammapada, which is a very old text. But this we study comparatively often. The text begins with a statement that first of all, what the Tenzo needs is body-mind. まず一番最初に天蔵教訓で道元禅師は何よりも天蔵にとって大事なものは菩提心であると。あるいは、まあ道心という言葉もありますけれども、意味は同じですね。菩提という言葉は、まあ、インドではボディと言ってますけれども、音訳したら菩提、で意訳すると道。この道という字には、まあ、道という意味もあるんですけれども、本来は中国ではタオ、要するに天地の真実という意味で使われてますので、その真実の心、あるいは悟りという意味も、この道という字、菩提という字に悟りという意味もあるので、悟った心という意味と、悟りを求める心という、まあ、この2つの意味で使われているんですね。これはまあ本来なら全然違う意味ですね。もうすでに悟りを得ている心と、これからそれを得ようとする心、愚道心という意味で使われる場合もあるんです。考えてみれば全然違うことなんですが、このまあ道元禅師の考え方ではおそらくつながっていると思うんですね。悟りを求める心の中にはもうすでに悟りが現れている。悟ってなければ、悟りの後押しがなければ、そもそも修行しよう、悟りを求めようという心が 出てこない。弁道はだったと思いますが、そこにある一つの公案が出てきます。ある禅寺にある雲水が3年ほどもう修行して、そこのお寺の住職に一度も質問したことがなかった。そこで住職がある日にその雲水を呼んできて、お前はもう3年間、ここで修行しているけれども、なぜ今まで一度も私に質問したことはないのかと聞くんですね。それに対して雲水は、今までは黙ったけれども、実は前お世話になったお寺で悟りを開いてますと。なので、これ以上質問することはない。それに対して住職は、それは良かった。ところで、お前はどういう、きっかけで、どういう教えを聞いて悟ったのかと聞くと、雲水は、私は以前、お世話になった、師匠に、本当の私は何なのかを聞いたら、その師匠は、火の神様が火を求めていると答えた。現代日本語で言えば、そういう答え方。火の神様が火を求めている。それで、深く悟ることができたと。で、それを住職が聞いて、なるほど、これは素晴らしいお言葉だけれども、どうやら君はまだその意味が分かってないんだと。雲水は怒って部屋を出ようとするけれども、途中で考え直して部屋を出る前に振り返って、じゃあ本当の私は何なんだとその住職に聞くんですね。住職はそれに対して、それだ、火の神様が火を求めているんだと。で、そこでようやく悟ることができたと、言われている。で、この火の神様が火を求めている。これをどうやって解釈するか。この火というのは悟りのことですね。火の神様はもう火でできているようなものですから、悟りが悟りを求めているような、本来の自己を求めたって、ここにあるわけですから、本当の私はどこだろうかと考えたときに、そう考えたのはすでに本当の私ですから。本来の私ってどこだろうといくら探したって見つかるはずはない。悟りってどこだろうと思っていくら探したって見つかるはずはない。だって悟りを求めている自分はもうすでに悟っているわけです。ところが、この雲水の最初の受け止め方が間違ってたと、住職は指摘している。どうしてかというと、雲水は私が火の神様で悟りが火であればもう悟りを求める必要はないんだと。だってもう悟っているんだと。そう言われたじゃないかと。本来の私がここにあるわけだから、本来の私はどこだろうと探す必要は何もないんだと。そう受け止めて3年間、次にお世話になった師匠に一度も質問しなかったけれども、その受け止め方は間違っていると指摘されて、最初は怒って出ようとするけれども、振り返って、じゃあ、師匠、あなたならどう答えますかと言ったときに、それだと言われた。要するに、火の神様だからこそ火を求め続けなければいけない。 本来の私がここにいるわけだからこそ本来の私を求め続ける。悟っているからこそ悟りを求め続けるという、それでいいんだと。悟りを求めちゃいけないということではない。悟りを求めているというのは悟っている証拠。別にどこかに悟りというものが隠れているわけではない。それを求めているという行為の中に悟りが現れているという、意味の言葉なので、実はこの悟りの心と悟りを求める心はつながっているということです。The text Tenzokyokun, Instructions for the Cook, starts with a statement that first of all the Tenzo needs Bodhimind. I already said that. Bodhi is an Indian word which means awakening. So Bodhimind literally would be awakened mind. But Bodhi is translated into Chinese with this character, which in Chinese would be Tao, which means the truth, but also it means the way. And sometimes Bodhi mind, therefore, is translated as the way-seeking mind, or the mind of the way, but often seeking is added. So it's the mind seeking for the way, or it's the mind seeking for awakening. So if you think about it, these are two completely different translations. One says Bodhi mind is already awakened mind. The other translation claims that a Bodhi mind isn't yet awakened, but it's seeking for awakening. Which of these two translations is correct? I would say that both are correct. In the Bendowa, which is another important text by Dogen Zenji, where he talks about Zazen, there's a koan which deals with a monk and the abbot of a monastery where the monk had lived for 3 years without ever asking the abbot a question. And one day the abbot calls the monk for an interview and says, well, you've been practicing here for 3 years, you never asked a question, why is that? And the monk says, well, I didn't tell you until now, but actually the monastery where I stayed before, I had an enlightenment experience, and now all my questions are solved. I have no more questions to ask. And the abbot says, oh, that's good for you. Good to hear. Please tell me how that enlightenment experience occurred. And the monk said, I was asking my former teacher, what's the true self? And at that time, my former teacher answered, that's just like the god of fire looking for fire. And when I heard these words, all my doubts were solved. And the abbot of the present monastery then says, well, that's a fine saying, but I doubt that you really understood it. It seems that you didn't really get the meaning of the words. And the monk is upset by that and is trying to leave the room, but when he's just reached the door, he's thinking about it once more, and he turns back to the abbot and asks him, well, what then is my true self? And the abbot says, there, that's it. The god of fire looking for fire. And here the fire is standing for enlightenment or for the true self or whatever. The monk, when he first heard these words 3 or 4 years ago, he probably took them as, according to my teacher, I'm already enlightened, I'm already my true self, so there's really no meaning in looking for my true self. It doesn't make any sense to look for myself. It doesn't make any sense to look for enlightenment when I'm already enlightened. So he stopped asking questions, he stopped seeking for anything. And the abbot of the new monastery says, the words are fine, but your understanding is wrong. the point he's making is only because you're enlightened, you're looking for enlightenment. Of course, you are already your true self. But that doesn't mean that you should stop looking for your true self. Only when you're looking for your true self manifests in that looking. Satori, or enlightenment, manifests in seeking enlightenment. So it's not that when you seek enlightenment after 3 years or 5 years, or eventually you will find it somewhere. But also doesn't mean that because you're already enlightened, you don't have to look for anything. When you look for enlightenment, when you seek for it, that's already a manifestation of enlightenment. And nowhere else. That's where it manifests. That also relates to the first part of the Gyoji chapter of the Sogo Genzo, which I talked about 5 days ago. But I talked about that section only in Japanese. In the beginning of the Gyoji chapter, Dogen Zenji says that, well, he uses the expression do-kan. Do is again the way, and kan means a ring. So he's talking about the ring of the way. And he uses 4 words: Hosshin, Shugyo, Bodai, Nehan. Hosshin means to arouse body mind. Shugyo means to practice. Bodai, again, then is Bodhi itself. Hosshin is basically the first step towards Bodhi. And Bodai is when you reach it. And Nehan is Nirvana. So there's 4 steps in practice. First is Hosshin, the first aspiration towards the way. Then there's practice. Then there's Bodhi, the attainment of Bodhi. And then there's Nirvana. And normally you'd think that's the end of the story. At the beginning, you're looking for Nirvana. You take several steps, and finally you find Nirvana. But Dogen Zenji says that's not the case. There's a ring. These are a ring. So after Nehan, after Nirvana, comes again Hosshin, arousing body mind. First you arouse body mind, then you practice, then you finally find Bodhi, you attain Nirvana, and the next step is you arouse body mind. Practice, get the Bodhi, Nirvana. It's a circle. These are connected and one. So without Nirvana, if you wouldn't be in Nirvana already, you wouldn't be arousing body mind. If you wouldn't be Buddhas already, you wouldn't be here. Because, I mean, who would sit for 2 hours in the morning staring at the wall? If you wouldn't be a Buddha already, who would do that? 5日前でしたか、6日前でしたか、話した消防現像行事の頭にも似たような話が出てきます。発心修行菩提涅槃という道観、道の、輪っか、英語で言えば輪があるんですけれども、発心をして修行をしてやがて菩提を得て涅槃に入る。ところが涅槃の次にまた新たな発心がある。涅槃の後押しがあって、菩提と涅槃の後押しがあって、そもそも発心と修行ができる。そういう意味では、道心は悟りの心でもある、悟りを求める心でもある。その悟りを実践しようとする心でもある。それがまず大事であると、道元禅師が言われるです。菩提心の定義は、道元禅師の書物の中に あちらこちら出てきます。ところが結構、意味合いが違ったりするんですね。割と若い頃に書かれた学童用人集では、菩提心とは無常を感ずる心と書いてあります。無常というのは、つまりすべてのものが移り変わっていくという 意味ですね。無常をこれでいいのかな。感ずる、見る。無常をはっきりと見ること、なんか書けてますよね。まあ、見るのつもりで書いてます。感ずる。菩提心とはすべてのものが無常であると。はっきり見る。で、それは自分の周りではなく、この普通、私と思っている。まあ私は今年50歳になったんですけれども、昭和43年から今日まで生きてたこのものも実は無常である。いつ死んでもおかしくない。いつ死んでもおかしくないどころか、実は今日もうすでに死んでいる。昨日の私はもうどこにもいない。昨日の私とは違うものが今日ここに生きているけれども、明日はそれはもういないはず。それがまあ無常を感ずる。それが分かったら、もうのんびりできないはずと道元禅師が言われるんですね。本当にそれが分かったら、まあ、小学生の夏休みみたいに宿題は明日にしよう、明後日にしようと。修行はまあ80までおそらく平均寿命があるんだから、若い時よりも、若い時はギャルハントをして恋愛をして、金儲けして、それこそ50歳のおじさんになってからでも前回、通おうとか、それは要するに無常を感じてない証拠ですね。今日しかないんだと。今日しかない。修行するには今日しかないというのが無常を感ずることであって、これは同心である。そう思った人は、行道図念を張ろうという言葉が出てきますけれども、自分の頭が燃えているかのように修行をせざるを得ない。他人事ではない。ありがたい話を聞きにお寺に行くんではなく、自分が救われなくちゃいけないという思い。それも今日でなくちゃいけないという思いでやるのは無常を感じた時の菩提心。これは学道四人書の中の話です。割と晩年に書かれている発菩提心という、これは消防現像の巻ですけれども、その中では地味徳度鮮度たという、まあ、全然違う言葉が出てきます。地味徳度。度というのは、まあ涅槃に渡ることですね。悟りを得ることという意味ですね。地味徳度というのは、私はいまだに悟りを得てない。まだ救われていないということですね。で、鮮度他と続きますけれども、先に他を渡そう。先に人を救おう。自分はまだ救われてないのに、人を先に救おうという心こそ菩提心だという、言葉が晩年の道元禅師の作品に出てきます。で、この言葉は考えてみたらちょっとおかしいというか、まあ不思議な言葉です。まあ自分よりも人を優先させるという、気持ちがそこに働いているんでしょうけれども、そもそも禅では自と他を分けないのが大前提ですね。自と他が一つであると言われる。どうして自分を後回しにして人を優先させなくちゃいけないという。 疑問が湧いてきます。もう一つは、人を救うためには、まず自分が救われてなくちゃ救えないはずです。この救うというのを悟りという意味で受け取ると、自分が悟ってないのに、どうしたら人を悟りの境地へ導くことができるんだろうかという。どう考えたって、矛盾しているというか、おかしい。私が思うに、道元禅師がこれを晩年になって強調したのは、例えば自他一如、私と他、自他一如とよく言われるけれども、自他一如はすぐ誰にでも言える。私と一切衆生は一つだと。だからお腹が空いた時に自分が食べたら皆さんも満腹になるはずだと。この理屈でいけば。悟りでもまず自分が悟って、で自分が悟ったらもう自分の目の前がそこで解決したらもう全宇宙がそれで悟るはずだと。でもそれはあまりにも自分に都合のいい理屈になってしまうんじゃないですか。確かに本当は自分の問題が解決してなければ人の問題を解決することはできない。さらに自他一如でいけばそもそもみんなつながっているんだから、お釈迦様が悟った時に一切衆生も同時に悟ったと言われている。だったら私も悟れば一切衆生は悟るはず。なぜ人のことを考えなくちゃいけないんだと。でもそれでいけば結局自分のことだけ精一杯になってしまうし、自分の問題さえ解決していれば終わりということになってしまう。それじゃ大乗仏教じゃない。だから道元禅師は晩年あえて自と他を分けて、お前は一番最後でいいんだと。まず人を救いなさい。でも本人はまだ救われてない。どうしたら人を救えるんだろう。救えないじゃないか。私一人だっていまだに救われてないのに、どうして人を救えるんだろうかと。ところで、そこでいっぺん自分を忘れて、ダメ元で何かを人のためにしよう。私だってまだ救われてないけれども、ダメ元でじゃあ人を先に救おうという、この心が少し芽生えてくると、ひょっとして今そこで芽生えようとしている、この気持ちこそ悟りだったという気づきがあるんですね。これこそ私がずっと求めてた悟り、救い。悟りたい、悟りたい、悟りたいと何年も頑張ったけど悟れなかった。じゃあ俺の悟りは後でいい。人のことをちょっと考えてみよう。ふっと出てきたこの心こそ菩提心であったかもしれない。これこそ私が求めてた救いだったかもしれないと。だから道元禅師はどうしたら人を救うのかということに関して同じこの地味徳度鮮度たという願いを人にも持ってもらうことだと言うんですね。人を救うためにはその人にも地味徳度鮮度たという願いを持ってもらわないといけないという、これは晩年の道元禅師の、菩提心の定義です。The Tenzokyokun starts with claiming that first of all the Tenzo needs body-mind, and body-mind is both the mind of the way and way-seeking mind. In his different works, Dogen Zenji defines body-mind in different ways. For example, in the Gakudo Yoshinshu, Dogen Zenji says, body-mind is the mind that sees impermanence. And there he's not talking about the impermanence around you, but your own impermanence. Like I'm 50 now, and usually I would think, well, I've the same person who has been living since 1968. Well, of course, I changed to a certain degree, but it's more or less the same person. At least during the last 10 years, I didn't change so much. And seeing impermanence means to realize that you could die any day, you could die anytime. You're not permanent, and not only that, actually you're dying already right now. You're not the same person that you were yesterday, and I'm not the same person that I will be tomorrow. I'm only this person today, in this moment. When you realize that you can't wait with practice until tomorrow, because who's going to practice tomorrow? You can only practice now. The person that you are right now can practice only today. You can't wait. And usually we're pretty good at waiting until tomorrow when it comes to things that we don't like so much. But if you really have this mind, Dogen Zenji says it's like there's a fire burning in your head. If there's a fire burning on your head, you wouldn't say, well, I can wait until tomorrow until I unput this fire. You have only that moment. And then later in his life, this is a definition of Bodhimind he gave when he was 34. And then later when he is approaching 50, in a chapter that is entitled Hotsubo Daishin in the Shobogenzo, meaning arousing Bodhimind. He says, in Japanese, it's Jimi Tokudo Sendota. Vowing to save yourself, vowing to save others before you're saved yourself. You haven't reached the shore of nirvana yet, but you vow to take others to nirvana before you. And that's kind of a strange definition of Bodhimind. First of all, we usually say in Zen that the self and others are not different. So why would you put yourself last and vow to save others before you, if it's one and the same? Sometimes it's said that the moment that Shakyamuni had enlightenment, all living beings in the same instant were enlightened. So if any one of us would reach enlightenment, then all the rest of us, in theory, should reach enlightenment. So what is wrong with trying to get enlightened first? If I get enlightened, all of you get enlightened. Why should I wait with my own enlightenment until later and first try to help you with your enlightenment? That's a little bit strange about this. Another strange thing is, how could I possibly help you with your enlightenment if I'm not enlightened first? How can I help you to get to nirvana if I don't know where nirvana is myself? I first need to find it myself before I can teach you the way. The problem with that attitude is, as long as you think that you need to find it first, you won't find it. And this theory that, well, once I find it, all other living beings will also be enlightened. Oh, that's nice in theory, but that also is just ego attachment. So in his later life, Dogen Zenji says, forget about yourself, forget about your own enlightenment, help others first. How is that possible? How can I help others if I'm not first enlightened? The funny thing is, if even just for a little bit you manage to forget yourself and think about what you could do for others, when this thought, what could I do for others, starts to blossom, there's kind of, the blossom is almost opening. And then you realize, oh, actually, what I was looking for all these years, the enlightenment, the Bodhi mind, whatever, nirvana, and I couldn't find it for all these years. And now I made up my mind to forget about enlightenment and help others first. Actually, this thought, this wish to help others, what is blooming there, That's actually enlightenment. The enlightenment that I was looking for myself all this time and couldn't find. Actually, the moment you let it go and think about others, there it is, there it is. Also in the Bendowa, there's the saying, the moment you open your hands, there it is. 放てば手に見てりという言葉も、弁ドワに出てきますけれども、同じからくりだと思うんですね。今まで掴もうと思ってたものを手放すと、あ、ここだったのかという。では、天蔵教区の中で、菩提心はどういうふうに定義されているか。まず、割と最初の方で、天蔵は万をもって菩提心となすと言われています。書かれています。万というのは信じて書くと、この字です。絆という字ですね。万をもって菩提心となすという言葉が出てきます。今でこそ日本では絆は大事だと言われるんですけれども、仏教では本来絆は束縛を意味するので、あまりいいものと、されてないんですね。むしろ束縛から自由になるのは仏教の目標であったはずなのに、道元禅師は万をもって菩提心となす。実はこの万という字にはたすきという字も意味もあるんですね。たすきも自分を縛るために使われるんですね。よく有心さん以外は誰もやってないけれども、有心さんはもう薬石前から着物に着替えて、芸者さんみたいな格好でここに歩き回るけれども、台所で手伝うときは、まあ袖が引っかかるからたすきをして、有心さんがあそこで手伝うわけですね。これがこの万ですね。あえて自分を束縛し、たすきをつける。なぜそれをするかというと、袖をめくり上げて働きやすいようにする。だから、天蔵の菩提心ということは、まず長いこの衣の袖をめくり上げて働くことである。インドにはまだ衣はなかったんですけれども、中国に入ってから天蔵が衣を身につけることになった。この衣というのは偉い役員さんが着る服だったらしいんですね。その辺の庶民は着ることができない。でもお坊さんは偉いからおけさの下にこの衣を着る。だから昔から中国で自給自足、お寺は自給自足だったと言われるけれども、本当にお坊さんたちがあんな衣で畑仕事をしたか、田んぼをやったのかは、まあ疑問ですね、私は。もしやったとしたら、それこそもう衣を脱いで、たすきをして働かないといけない。で、多くのお坊さんはもう昔からそれをしなかったと私は思う。だからこそ道元禅師は万をもって菩提心となすという必要があったんですね。菩提心があるならば、まず働きなさいということですね。道元禅師ご自身はそう言うけれども、本人は天蔵をやったことがあるかどうかというと、それもわからない。なぜそう思うかというと、天蔵教区の中には自分が天蔵をした話は出てこないんですね。ところが若い頃に中国に渡って実際に天蔵で頑張ってた人に会った話、有名な話は2つ出てくるんですね。一つはまだ船の上でどうも、入管管理局みたいなところに引っかかって、道元禅師は何週間も上陸できなかったようです。師匠の明禅はすぐに入国できて、もう先にあちらこちら修行に行くんですけれども、道元禅師は船に残って、本当は本人もあちこちに、師匠にいろんな師匠に会って話聞きたいけれども、それができない。毎日船の上で過ごして、入国許可を待っているわけです。 で、この船は日本からいろんな品物を持って行って、それを買いにある中国の天祖がやってきたんですね。まあ、椎茸であったという話、説がありますけれども、ある天祖は椎茸を買いに日本の船に来たと。で、この天祖を道元禅師は捕まえて、ぜひ話を聞きたい。だから今夜はご馳走してあげるからこの船で泊まって、私の質問に付き合ってくれと。天蔵は、いや私は忙しい、お寺に帰って明日の朝ごはんを用意しないといけない。で、道元禅師はあなたのそのお寺は大きなお寺だろうから他にも朝ごはんの用意ぐらいは誰でもできるんじゃないかと、たくさんアシスタントがそこにいるはずだと。私はせっかく遠い日本から命かけてここまで来たんだから、まさか私のこの愚道心よりも明日の朝飯を優先させるそんなつもりはないだろうと言ったら、いや若い君はまだ修行のいろはも分かってないんだと言って天祖はその時帰ってしまったんですね。修行とは何かとか、そういう問いを、投げかけたままで天蔵は、その問いさえ忘れなければ、君はこれから迷うことはないだろうと言って帰ってしまった。君はまだ現時点では修行もわからないし、文字もわからないと。で、後で道元禅師はもう一度この天蔵に会って、文字の意味は何だと聞いたら、1、2、3、4、5という答えが出てきて、真実、修行について聞くと、どこにでも隠れることなく現れているという答えを後で得ているんですね。とにかくこの天蔵が中国で最初に出会った禅僧であって、すごいインパクトがあったようですね。もう一つの話も有名ですけれども、道元禅師はようやく上陸できてあちこちに回るんですけれども、修行寺を回るんですけれども、ある日に暑い夏の日に、もう60を超えた天蔵が、カンカンデリのところで石畳の上で何かを干してた。これもキノコだったという説もあれば海藻であったという説も、いろんな説はあるけれども、要するに何かを干した。で、道元禅師は、近づいて、あなたは何歳ですかと聞くと、68です。なんでそのお年で、自らこんなしんどいことをやっているのかと、若いアシスタントにやらせればいいじゃないかと。道元禅師が聞くと、他はこれ我にあらずという、有名な答えが出てくるんですね。人にやらしたら自分がやったことにならない。これがせっかくの自分の修行なので、人にやらすわけにはいかないだろうと。もちろん他にできる人はいくらでもいるんだけれども、それを人にさしたら、じゃあ自分は何をするかということ。道元禅師は、じゃあどうしても自分でやるならば、なぜこの一番暑い時にやるのか、もうちょっと涼しい時にやればいいじゃないのと。それに対して天蔵は今なさずんばまたいずれの時を待たん。今やらなければいつやるんだという。今しかないじゃないかということですね。これがTenzokyokunの中で一番有名なエピソードの一つですね。で、道元禅師自身はおそらく一度も天蔵やってないんですけれども、日本に帰ってきていかにこの天蔵という職が大事であるか。ただの飯作りではない。 みんなが食べるためにはただ飯を作るんじゃなくて、料理をすることも修行である。最も大事な修行の一つ。How far did I get with the English? Bodaishin, I think that was the end of it. Saving others before yourself. In the Tenzokyokun, that is yet another definition of Bodhimind. Quite in the beginning, Dogen Zenji says for the Tenzo, well, this is read ban, and it means a tool that maybe you saw Yushin-san use it when he was helping with his kimono in the kitchen. He's using the so-called taski, kind of string that you use to roll your sleeves up. If you are wearing your monk's robes, it's very hard to work in the kitchen because the sleeves get trapped by stuff or they get dirty. In India, the monks didn't wear these black robes yet, but that became the monk's outfit when Buddhism was transmitted from India to China. And it's basically what high officials wore at the time in China. So monks were also considered to be of high standing. They were different from peasants who would plow the fields or normal workers who would do work in the kitchen. So Dogen Zenji first emphasizes, for the Tenzo, forget about your status. Roll up your sleeves and work. That's an expression of Bodhimind. Get to work. Get moving. And although he says that it's doubtful if Dogen Zenji himself ever cooked in the kitchen. If you read the Tenzokyokun, you get the impression that probably he did not, because he's not talking about his own experiences in the kitchen. But he tells us about encounters with cooks that he had in China. The first was when he was still on the ship and he had difficulties to enter China. His teacher had already permission to enter the country, and he was visiting monasteries, and the student Dogen stayed behind alone on the ship for several weeks, I think. And on the ship from Japan, they had several goods that they wanted to import to China, and one day a cook, a Tenzo, came from an adjacent monastery to buy some dried shiitake, I think it was. And they sold those shiitake to the cook, and because it was the first Zen monk that Dogen met, he asked him many questions about the meaning of the scriptures and the meaning of practice. And he asked the Tenzo if he could stay overnight on the ship, and he would treat him to a meal, so that finally Dogen Zenji could ask him all these questions, and the cook would answer him. And the cook says, sorry, but I have more important things to do than that. I have to prepare tomorrow's breakfast in the monastery. And Dogen says, you can't be serious. I've come all these hundreds of miles and I risked my life. And you say tomorrow's breakfast is more important than my questions. I want to know about the Buddhist teachings. I want to know about practice. And the cook says, well, my young friend, obviously you still don't know what scriptures are. You don't know what practice is. And he's leaving. And sometime later, months later, years later, Dogen Zenji again meets the cook and asks him once more, what are the scriptures? And the cook says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is practice? And the cook says, nowhere in the universe it's hidden. So basically, practice is manifest everywhere. That's the first story, or the first cook that Dogen meets in China. And later, there's a second encounter that's maybe even more famous. On a hot summer day around noon, he sees an old monk drying. It might have been, again, some kind of mushrooms, or it could have been seaweeds, on the stone pavement in front of the hall. And Dogen Zenji asks him, how old are you? And the monk says 68. Dogen, at the time, he's 24, 25 or something. So he could have volunteered to do the job instead of the cook. But he's saying, well, why don't you get some guy from the kitchen, some young guy from the kitchen to do that job for you? And the Tenzo says, others are not me. So probably there would have been lots of others who could have done the job. But if I don't practice, somebody else can't do it for me. It's just like going to the toilet. You need to go to the toilet. Of course, somebody else could go for you, but that doesn't solve your problem. If you are hungry, somebody else can eat the ice cream for you, but that won't make you happy either, even though we're all connected, we're all one, in theory. If I take a pee for you, you're still in trouble. So that's basically the point of the Tenzo. Of course, somebody else could do this job for me, but then I'm not doing it. So Dogen Zenji says, okay, that's fine if you insist on doing it yourself. Why don't you do it at some other time when the sun has gone down? Why do you do it now at noontime when it's the hottest? And the cook famously says, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? There's only now. You're telling me to do it some other time. There's no other time than now. These two encounters are very famous, and although probably Dogen himself never had the opportunity to cook when he got back to Japan and later founded Eiheiji, he wrote the Tenzokyokun, where he emphasizes how important the work of the Tenzo is, and that it's expressed in actually rolling up your sleeves and getting to work. So it's not, Bodhimind is not some kind of theory. It's also not just some wish that I love all living beings, may they all be happy. But you put that into action in the kitchen by cooking. And then at the end of the Tenzokyokun, he exemplifies Bodhimind by 3 minds. In Japanese, they are called sanshin. 3 minds, which are in Japanese. Tenzokyokunの最後には、菩提師の、具体例というか分かりやすい言い換えとしては、鬼神、老神、大神という三神の話が出てきます。In Japanese, it's Kishin, Roshin, Daishin, the mind of joy, joyful mind, old mind, literally old mind and big mind, these 3 minds. Kishin は喜ぶ心、喜びの心。何を喜ぶか。そこで道元禅師は結構面白いことを言うんですね。天国じゃなくてよかったと喜びなさい。天国に生まれなくてよかった。仏教には昔から輪廻転生の話が出てきます。特に中国はどうかわからないんですけど、インドでは深く信じられてたようです。道元禅師はわからないんですね。火が燃えてしまうと灰になる。この灰が再び薪にならない、焚き木にならないという言葉があって、同じように人が死ねば再び戻らないという言葉があるんですけれども、逆にこの輪廻転生説を使っているところもあるんですね。で、ここもそれを使っているんですね。道元禅師は輪廻転生によれば、人間は6道、6つの世界があるんですね。6道の中では、上から2番目が人間ですね。一番下が地獄です。地獄が一番ひどい。地獄に生まれてよかった。それは誰でも喜ぶことです。2番目が餓鬼道です。餓鬼道はいつもお腹が空いて、いくら食べてもそれは喉を通らない。 いつもお腹空いてる、お腹空いてる。もう目の前には美味しいものがあっても食えない。で、動物は自分の、食欲、性欲、睡眠欲の奴隷で満たされると寝てしまう。食ったら寝る。食っちゃ寝というのは動物の世界です。その上にアシュラ、いつもカンカンと怒っている。アシュラたちがいるわけですね。地獄、ガキ、動物、畜生ですね。畜生、アシュラといっても結局私たち人間の話だと思うんですね。ふっと気がつくと人間なんだけれども、気がつかないと欲望の奴隷になったり、アシュラのように怒ったり、地獄を味わったりするわけです。で、ふっと我に考えるときは人間ですね。これは六道輪廻で言えば5番目ですね。地獄、ガキ、畜生、アシュラの上に人間がいるわけです。人間はいろいろと考えている。でも結局わからない。なぜ生まれたのもわからないし、死んでどうなるのもわからないし、生きる意味もわからないし、でもなんとなく物足りない。いつも苦しい思いを持っている。地獄ほどではないけれども、物足りない、物足りない。悟りたいという思いもこの物足りない表現の一つ。で、その上に天国があるわけです。天上界。天上界では毎日毎日温泉旅行みたいなもんですね。いつもちょうどいいお湯に浸かってて、うまい酒が出て、温泉から出たら温泉芸者が踊っている。そういう世界ですね。で、それが何百年も何千年も続くらしいですね。道元禅師は、天蔵、お前が天国に生まれなくてよかったと。喜びなさい。なぜならば、今天国におったら、仏教を学ぶ機会はない。そもそも、発菩提心できない。なぜかというと、自分の苦しみに気づかない。自分の在り方、疑問がない。天国では毎日毎日楽しいんだけれども、修行することなく100年も1000年も過ぎてしまうと、キリスト教と違って仏教の考え方では天上界も終わりがあるんですね。天国にも終わりがあるんですね。で、死んだらどこに落ちるかわからない。だって修行してもないし、自分の生き方を一度も考えたことがない。それができるのは人間として生まれたからこそ。お前は今台所に行って苦しい思いをしているかもしれないけれども、よかったじゃないか。現に人間であるし、修行道場の中に行って、天蔵という実践で仏の道が歩める。素晴らしいことではないかと。で、老心は老いた心なんだけれども、親のような心だと道元禅師が言うわけです。親が自分の子供のために料理しているような気持ちで料理をしなさい。他の人のことはわからないけれども、私が安泰寺に来て初めて転造させてもらった時は、喜びもあまり感じることはなかったし、いつも不満があったんですね。どういうわけか、自分が天蔵に当たっている時はいつも外が天気が良くて、ちょうどいい自分もやりたいような作務が行われる。で、天蔵当番が終わると雨が降って、明日の田植えのようなしんどい作務ばっかりが待っている。どうも自分がいつも負けくじを引いているわけですね。今日みたいないい天気の日、ましてや法産という休みの日に自分が転造しなくちゃいけないときは、なんで俺がここで一人であいつらのために飯を作らなくちゃいけないんだと。くそーと。そんな思いでやっているわけですね。 とか接心の時も、私はもう座禅が好きで安泰寺に来たわけですから、もうみんな今座禅しているのに私だけは座禅ができない。でどうせあいつら居眠りでもこいでるんだろう。どうせ飯が出るまで居眠りでもこいでるんだと。くそと。で、老心というのはそこを捨てること、そこを手放すことですね。そういう気持ちが出るのは、相手を自分のライバルだと思ったり、自分と比較して誰が損して誰が得している。自分が天蔵の時は自分は損しているつもりになっているし、今度田植えの時はまた自分は損しているつもり、今度は天蔵がいいなと。私も今日というような日は天蔵やりたいのに、今日に限っては天蔵じゃないんだと。いつも自分と相手を比較して、誰が得した、誰が損したという。それがお母さんと赤ちゃんであれば、そんな比較はしないと思う。夜中に赤ちゃんが泣いてても、まあ、たまにはお母さんですらうるさいと思うかもしれないけれども、一応無条件に父与える。何かを返してほしいという思いはそこにない。そういう、まあなかなか無理。ここはもうみんな赤ちゃんじゃないんだから、相手を自分の赤ちゃんだと。なかなか思えないけれども、比較をやめましょうというのはこの老心のポイントですね。損得の問題じゃないんだと。で、第一心というのは山のように高く、海のように広い、心、すべてを受け入れる心。山はなぜ高いかというと、どんな汚いゴミが飛んできても、どうぞ私の上に乗っかかりなさい。海はなぜ広いかというと、どんな汚れた川が流れてきても、私はきれいな川だけを受け入れますと言わずに、どうぞみんな流れてきなさいという。だからこそ、海になるわけです。そういう、3つの心、結局一つ同じ菩提心の現れですけれども、これがないと天蔵が務まらない。それで天蔵教訓が結ばれているんですね。In the end of the Tenzokyokun, these three minds, Kishin, Roshin, Daishin, joyful minds, old mind, but usually it's explained as parental mind and big mind, appear. About joyful mind, Dogen Zenji says, you should be happy about not being in heaven right now. Lucky for you, good for you that you weren't born in heaven. According to Buddhism, there's 6 realms in which we can be born. The lowest is hell, the highest is heaven, but different from Christianity, these are not eternal. So you can be born in hell and be there for several thousand years, but then eventually your life in hell will end and you're reborn. The next one would be the hungry ghosts. Those are always hungry, but their throat is so thin that they can't eat. So even if there's delicious food in front of them, it doesn't pass their throat. That's the gaki, or hungry ghosts. Animals would be the third one from the bottom. Those are basically slaves of their desire. When they are hungry, they eat, then they have sex, and then they sleep. And that's basically how their whole lives work. And then there's the Ashura, the fighting demons that are always angry and struggling with each other. So basically, I think these are all expressions for the human realm. That's actually what we do with our lives a lot. We're looking for stuff that we can't get, but if I can't get it, I might as well die, but you can't get it. You always want what you can't get. You're a slave of your desire, and you keep clashing with people, getting angry at them or getting angry at yourself. The human realm is basically when you wake up that for a moment and you return to yourself and ask yourself, well, what am I actually doing with my life? And you don't know. Nobody knows. You don't know why you're born. You don't know what happens when you die. You don't know the meaning of life. You don't know who you are. You don't know what you want in life. You're always always frustrated. You're not never completely satisfied. That's what defines us humans. We're never really happy. And then the sixth realm at the top, that would be heaven. And being in heaven would be like living in a Japanese onsen all your life. So you're always having this nice hot bath, and you're served sake, nice sake, and there's geishas dancing at night for you. All of your wishes come true. All of the time, the whole day. And this continues for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. And Dogen Zenji says, good for you that you weren't born in heaven, because there would have been no opportunity for you to encounter Buddhism. You would never ask yourself how you want to live your life. You would never ask yourself who you are. And when your life in heaven would have ended, who knows where you would have dropped. Good for you that you're a human being. Good for you that you're the Tenzo in a monastery, because now you can practice the Dharma. Now you can engage with these questions. So that's kind of joyful mind, being happy about the fact that we're not in heaven. Loshin old mind is explained as parental mind by Dogen Zenji. Cook for others as if they were your baby. I don't know how it is with others, but I remember when I was first in the kitchen in Antaiji, I was really not so happy about the fact that I'm there in the kitchen. And for some reason, whenever I had the kitchen job for 5 days, it was nice weather and it was kind of samu that I also wanted to do, and I was admiring the guys who could be outside while I had to be in the kitchen and cook. And then whenever I would get out of the kitchen, miraculously it was raining and we were planting rice and stuff like that. I was always kind of on the losing side. If I was in the kitchen, I didn't want to be in the kitchen, and if I had to do regular samu, I didn't want to do regular samu. I would rather prefer to be the Tenzo. And also when I was Tenzo doing sesshin, if I was not Tenzo during session, then I would be in pain, and I would admire the Tenzo for being able to stretch his leg a couple of hours in the kitchen. But if I was the Tenzo, then I would tell myself, well, actually I came to Antaiji to do Zazen. I didn't come here to cook. And all these other guys probably right now, they're on their cushion and sleeping anyway, until I strike the wooden clavers and then they come to eat my food. Why do I have to cook for these lazy monks that sleep there on the cushion? So that's an expression of not having either joyful mind or parental mind. Like if you have a baby and the baby is crying in the middle of the night, it sometimes happens that, yes, you get fed up by the continual crying and you say, well, could you please give me some sleep? But most of the time you're pretty okay with your baby crying, and you give them their milk and you don't ask for anything back. You don't ask the baby, can you please also do something for me sometime? Because it's your baby. And in Antaiji, we emphasize the point that we are not babies here. You're all adults and you have to wipe your own ass. But when you are the Tenzo, you also sometimes need to take this perspective. Well, actually, Dogen Zenji encouraged me to think of the others as if they were my baby. I'm the mother. And it's much easier if you stop comparing yourself and always thinking you're the loser. When you're the Tenzo, you're thinking you're losing. When you're not the Tenzo, you're thinking you're the loser. When you're in the rice field, you're thinking you're the loser. When you're in the hatake, you also don't like that. You're chopping wood, oh, then you hate chopping wood. Yeah, Dogen Zenji would say, you should be happy that you're not in heaven now. You're exactly in the right spot right now. And big mind is the mind of a mountain or the ocean, Dogen Zenji says. The mountain wouldn't be so big if it would reject all the dust that's coming flying this way. The mountain would say, no, please, no dirt here, no dust here. Well, it wouldn't be a mountain. It consists basically of dirt. It's a mass of dirt that has piled up over the centuries. The same with the ocean. If the ocean would say, I only need the clean rivers, the dirty rivers can stay away, it wouldn't have become the ocean. The ocean accepts all of the rivers. So that's the final big mind. And all of these three minds, joyful mind, parental mind, are expression of body mind, the body mind that the cook needs. Yeah, apart from that, there's lots of other stuff in the Tenzokyokun. You can find it on the internet if you look for it. Of course, it's also available in book form. Dogen Zenji tells you to also, well, put away stuff carefully. Stuff that belongs in a high place goes in a high place. Stuff that belongs in a low place goes in the low place. Be careful with the calculations, that you don't have too much leftovers, but also there shouldn't be people that go without eating. So also it's not only theory, but also some stuff is quite to the point. But today I want to finish here. 天竺教訓の中にはこの他にも、具体的な話もたくさんあります。道具を注意深く扱うこと、あるものは高いところに置き、別のものは低いところに置かなくちゃいけないという話。物事の量を計算するときもよくよく、食べる人の数、どんな人が食べるのか、その日のコンディションを考えて余り物がないように、でも逆に足りないというのも困る、そういう具体的な話も出てきますけれども、今日はこの菩提心にフォーカスして、天蔵教訓の話を終わりたいと思いますが、ご質問等ありましたらどうぞ何でも。私の話以外にもこのリトリートについてとか仏教について何についてでもいいですので何でも聞いてください。If you have questions about either my talk about the retreat or about Buddhism or about Antaiji, anything, please feel welcome to ask. はい、どうぞ、please.
I have one question about your telling about the fact that you should help others first. And I was wondering how you can help others without being attached to your own ego as well. It's a difficult thing.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to say a little thing about that when I said in Buddhism usually we say self and others are one. So the moment you separate them, it seems that, well, to help others there needs to be me here, otherwise I can't help others. But if you think it about the other way around, you say everyone is connected, so there's no me and there are no others that I could help. But often that turns into an excuse to do nothing. While what seemingly seems to be discriminative thinking to say, I help the others first, I think that's actually what gets you beyond the ego attachment. If you're really seriously attached to your ego, you wouldn't think about helping others. Or maybe you help others but only to prove that you're a good person. I mean, there's a problem with that attitude. I help others so that they know I'm a good person and they thank me and they think good of me. And I don't think that's what Dogen Zenji means here, though. I mean, he explicitly says that, well, it's a quite long chapter, but he says, well, don't hope that helping others will eventually also make you a Buddha. So even if you never reach Buddhahood, still help others. Still help others. So I think he's pretty serious about letting go of the ego. It's just that, just saying, oh, we're all one. So there's no need actually to help anybody. Or whenever I help myself, I'm helping the others at the same time because we're all one. The temptation, I think, is to use that as an excuse to just do whatever pleases your ego. By making that distinction and creating the others, which are actually just an imagination, but the moment you forget about yourself and help the others, not because you expect something better, but only for that, then you realize, oh, actually that wish in itself was the thing that I was looking for all the time, that Satori thing. Hi, please.
It seems like whenever Dogen is trying to approach realization, it's always in the form of paradoxes. Like, for example, search for something which you already have. But in our daily experience, if we have something, we don't search for it. Or we search for something which we don't have. In the second example, in which you have to help other people before you. It seems like once you realize that, there won't be any point in looking for another realization of that. So is there any other way to look at paradoxes, like not in a daily life sort of way, for entertainment? Because it seems like...
Is there any other way to look at paradoxes?
Because for example, in Scandinavian mythology, whenever the hero goes to search something, it's told like, go east of the moon and west of the sun. Or in Russian fairy tales, it's told like, go there, I don't know where. Do that, I don't know what. Or
yes.
Another paradox, like the Dutch graphic designer E. C. Escher, his paintings are kind of paradoxical. But it seems like it's always for enjoyment. Is there a way to approach paradoxes?
What was this one with the east of the moon, west of the sun, or the other way around?
Yeah. It's a Scandinavian mythology.
Yeah, it's. I find that pretty nice because I mean, a straightforward thing to say would, it's already here now. Just be here now. Just be the person you are. But by saying look for it east of the moon and west of the sun, or the other way around. What was the other one? The Russian one?
Go there, I don't know where. Do that, I don't know what. So when the hero has to go and do that. Or
You could also say, well, don't go anywhere. Just stay where you are. Don't do anything. But that becomes then an understanding. Kind of you think, oh, just like with the fire boy searching for fire, and the boy thing, and the student who hears that, oh, I'm the fire god, I don't have to look for fire anymore. Oh, it's already here now, why should I go anywhere? So you need to keep going, but there's no end to the way. There isn't even a fixed direction. So I think that's, in this case, east of the moon, west of the sun. There's no east of the moon, west of the sun. So wherever you go, it's there. It's just that you keep moving. So it's not that you sit there and lie on the couch and say, well, enlightenment is already here now. I just stay in the moment and chill in the moment. And that's what actually some people do. So that's kind of the meaning I would take out of that paradox. with saving others, you asked this question: what realization? What would one
Well,
look
we realize
for?
it sort of once we realize it. Okay,
Mm.
I don't need to be awakened, or I don't have to have
Mm.
realization to
Mm.
help other,
Mm.
and that will make me realize, or that will make me enlightened. But once I have this realization,
Mm.
then we come back to the first paradox. Why should I keep searching for it? Didn't I just already understood that? So is it kind of constantly renewing that understanding of I need to help other
But
people?
I mean, it's not about like helping others is not an intellectual understanding. Like at the end of this talk, we will chant the 4 vows, which start Shujo Muhen Segando. Living beings cannot be counted, but I vow to all them to save them all. You can't do that. It's impossible to do that, but you vow to do it, and there's no end to that. And it's not an it's not an intellectual understanding that it's enough to just have that wish. But when you have the wish, you go east of the moon and west of the sun. So you have to go there, and you can't go there. You can't go there, but you need to keep going. And with sentient beings, I mean, it's hard enough to even help one person here at Antaiji. How can you ever save all living beings? It's impossible. It's impossible, but at least you try your best to do it. And if you should ever succeed to save one person, okay, let's try to save another person. But probably there will never gonna be a day where I can sit back and say, oh, finally I done it. I finally done it. There's no end.
So basically, constantly brooding over it or thinking over the
No,
question,
doing it basically. You're
which
doing
will
it.
harden your determination to do it, or
Fun?
which will kind of make your determination stronger to do it. Because, as I pointed at the usual paradoxes in daily life, we just read it and oh yeah, it's a fun story, and we just move to the next thing. But it seems like at those paradoxes that Dogen is pointing, we should somehow stay with it a little bit longer.
You can stay with it as long as you like, of course, yeah. Yeah. Yes, please. 他にお聞きしたいことは
Can I ask you 2 questions?
Yes.
When you said that you were not the person you were like 20 years ago, 20 years ago, what's the big for all of us? Can I just ask you a question? When you were 20 years old, then you were 30 years old, then you were 40 years old, and now you're 50 years old, what was your motivation when you were 20, 30, 40, and 50? And the second question is, what characteristics you value the most in other people?
What characteristics do I value most in other people? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I never really think about it so deeply. Like 2 years ago, we had this guy who was into personality types and which would be best for Antaiji, and he would kind of find out which type I was and which types were best for me and which types were not so good. But I'm not really so deep into that. So yeah, I don't know. Probably there's certain character traits which it's easier for me to match with, and others which is more difficult. But I don't know. At least not consciously. I could tell you, well, this is kind of what I desire. That character trait or personality, what I desire in a person. 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old me, motivation. At 20, I was still studying in Berlin, but I was going to the Zen dojo there every day, and I had my mind set on going to Japan eventually, and I was studying Japanese at the university to prepare myself. I didn't know about Antaiji yet, but I was hoping to find a monastery where I can practice 24 hours a day and maybe find an enlightened teacher and maybe become enlightened myself, hopefully as soon as possible. And at 30, I had been at Antaiji for 5 or 6 years already. Probably I was already the head monk at the time, maybe the second, or I was probably close to being at 31 I was the head monk, I was the second longest at the time in Antaiji, and I wasn't ready yet, I think, completely to stand on my own feet, but I was kind of growing into that. At 33, I left Antaiji. So I was kind of growing, getting prepared for standing on my own feet and trying to give what I learned in Antaiji to others. I didn't know yet, of course I had no idea that eventually I would become the abbot of that place. I thought that at one time I would go back to Germany and establish maybe my own small Zen dojo. But then when I actually left Antaiji at age 33, I decided first I want to start a dojo in Japan, because there's many temples. There's 15,000 temples in this country, but there's not the Western style dojo where normal people go in the city and they go before work or they go after work or on the weekends. I wanted to establish a dojo in Osaka for ordinary people, and as I had no money to rent a place, I became a homeless for 6 months. And I enjoyed that life, but then my teacher died and I was eventually called back to become the abbot, which I didn't know when I was 30. But at 30, yeah, my practice wasn't finished, but I was kind of getting the direction. Oh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I want to share this practice eventually with others. So I'm going to stay for another couple of years in Antaiji until my teacher tells me, okay, this is it, and then I'm going to go my own way. And at age 40, I was back here now as the abbot. 10 years ago, 2008. So when did Eko-san come? Eko-san wasn't here. Nobody of you were here at the time. So everybody has changed. It was a kind of difficult time for me. I'd become the abbot and 7 years had passed already. Among my 3 kids, the oldest 2 were still kindergarten age. It was difficult because there were always a number of people passing through Antaiji. Sometimes, often in the winter, it was only me and another person, or maybe me and 2 or 3 person. But then in the summer, sometimes it was 15 people. But then in the autumn, when it gets colder, people were leaving again. And few people stayed more than 6 months. Some stayed for a year, but usually in May, when we do the rice planting, I was the only one who knew how to do it. So basically I have to explain everything. And every spring I have to teach the Tenzo stuff. I have to teach the Jikido. Basically I'm kind of Eko-san for everything. I'm Eko-san all over the place, and everybody else is just short term, which was hard. Also with the two kids and my wife needing help. So at 40 I was pretty desperate, but also I didn't want to close down the place. And at one time, I took a sabbatical. It was around that time when I took half a year off and didn't accept any newcomers during that year. And that's when I wrote my first book in German also. So my first book came out in German, which created a certain interest also in Germany. And after that sabbatical, after I opened the gates again, people came and I gradually changed the rules to what we have now. You can come, but please also prepare yourself. I can't run this place alone. I need people who stay. So you should think about a 3-year stay. And if you want to stay 3 years, you need to know the language. So please learn the language beforehand. My first student that ordained with me was 70, but then I realized that it's really hard to do this kind of life if you're too old. So said preferably you're between 80 and 40. Otherwise it's going to be difficult to stay here for 3 years. It's also going to be difficult to study Japanese if you don't know it already. It was kind of desperate thing that I started when I was 40. But then it somehow worked, and after that I also got offers to write books in Japanese, which generated also more interest in Japan. Before it was more Gaijin temple, almost only foreigners that came here. And now it's kind of half, more half like, and that happened because of these Japanese books. So now at age 50, I'm happy to be here with all of you, and I hope I can still be here for some time. But also now my motivation or my goal is to find somebody who's gonna do this job after me. So that would for me be now the most important thing. Of course, I mean, everything is impermanent, also Antaiji. So there's gonna be a time in the history where there's no Antaiji anymore. But if possible, I would have this place continue for another 50 years, 100 years, maybe even 500 years. So for that I have to find a successor. And of course, like during this retreat, if lots of other people come here, even if it's only short term, that's also nice. And I hope that people use this opportunity to come here, even if it's only for 5 days, and take something out of that, and learn maybe something from that. But if you ask me, what's your motivation now at age 50 right now, I hope to find a successor who's maybe doing this job when I'm 60. And it's what I'm going to do when I'm 60, I have no idea. Might be that I'm still sitting here, but maybe I'm going to be somewhere else doing something else. Maybe it's possible. So yeah, that was a long answer to your first question. The second question, I couldn't do so much with it. はい、どうぞ。
今日は道元禅師の菩提心を最初は、無常を感じるということと、最後は自由に得度せんということ、今日は多分時系列的に言うと中間に当たると思うんですけど、僕が思ったのは道元禅師の中でその時の菩提心っていうのがどんどん深まって自分のエゴがなくなっていったのかなと思うんですが、それを実践するにあたって、そうですね、お聞きしたいのはネルケロ氏の今考える菩提心とは何なのかな。
私の考える菩提心。まあその道元禅師の言葉、どれもちゃんと無我の境地を表していると思いますね。無常だって本当に感じたならば、もう自分のエゴがそこに出るはずはない。起心、老心、大心だって自分の捨ててこそ出てくる言葉ですね。でも今のお前にとって菩提心とは何かと聞かれたら、 やはりまあこの後唱える主情無変性願度という、まあ、地味得度先祖他に限りなく近いですけれども、今の私に何ができるだろうかという、今この安泰寺において、今日明日何ができるかという、そういうことじゃないかと思うんですね。はい、すみません。はい。それしか出てきません。はい、please. Yes.
And Dogen, he asked the Tenzo about the scripture, the meaning of the scripture.
Yes.
The Tenzo answered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
What is the meaning of that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, probably the point of this is don't think about the meaning. Like, for example, if you're working in the kitchen and you calculate how much rice you need, I mean, that's how you work with letters or words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many people are there here right now? Right now it's 30. Until in the morning it was 31. How much rice do we need for that? When is the next Hosan? Or when is going to be the next session? So what's the meaning of the scriptures? Basically, it needs to be related to your everyday life. There's no meaning to the scriptures if it doesn't relate to what we eat, what we have on the table. If it doesn't relate to the schedule, if it doesn't relate to everyday things like that. Actually, that's pretty close to what philosophers found out in the last century when there was this kind of so-called turn, a linguistic turn in philosophy, where people realized that actually we don't really know what language is and what the meaning of words is. People used to think that the meaning of the word is something that you have in your head, and the word is a tool that you use to get that out of your head and get it into the head of the other person. So it would be best if we could communicate directly, mind to mind, but we can't do that, so we have to use these tools. So first there's a thought in my head or an emotion or something I want to express, so I get this tool that I get from somewhere and I use it. But then for example, Wittgenstein said, well, how do you learn language? How do you learn language? Actually, it's by counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that comes first. First comes this life experience, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or kind of somebody points at the color and you say red. And only after that you understand. So first comes life. First comes the action, for example, of counting. And what numbers are is something that you understand later. It's not that you have numbers in your head and then you learn what 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5 is, and then finally I got the tool to communicate these numbers. But actually, there's the practice of life day to day, and that's where the scriptures should be rooted. It's just unfortunately when we talk about the Lotus Sutra or the Kegon Sutra or the Shobogenzo, most of the time it's not related to life. And that's the good thing of the Tenzokyokun. Actually, Dogen Zenji is talking about calculations of rice cooking, stuff like that. And if you study it during the winter, there's lots of things there you can apply to your daily practice. So I think that's what he means with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, you know what letters is. There are words in your head, now use them. Use them in your daily life. That's where they come from. That's what they should be applied to.
And the second question is the Tenzo. Tenzo is a cook, but the letters are like the seating. I just wanted to know if you know where it's come from.
yeah, za is kind of, or zo, it's written in this way, but the seed. What is more kind of confusing for me is the first one. I mean, why do we use this one? Because this one usually means scriptures. Is that right? から仏典の典でしょ？これ何の意味？本来。はい？備え物。備え物。So even the Japanese don't really know that. Well, this is kind of, as you said, the seed, but it can be all kind of the location of something. Like, for example, in Tokyo, the Ginza, that's where the people that work with silver are located. Or it's kind of their, how do you say, their pun? Like headquarters, like guild, kind of like a community or kind of guild or neighborhood or there's also the kabuki-za where the kabuki takes place in Osaka. You got the kabuki-za, something where something takes place can be za. It can be a seat, but it can be more like this. And what this means is kind of the real mystery to me. I don't know, the Japanese that I just asked didn't know exactly. Somebody said sonaemono, which could be offering, kind of the place where the offering takes place, which would make sense, but I'm not quite sure if that's the original meaning. Yes, please.
Like as a Tenzo, do you, like, when we think about what you said, or Doom said, that we should care about the people we serve as our babies or our child.
Yes.
When, like, examples for Antaiji, like, would you think it would be better if we, like on one point, like we want to let our child get adults and give them like a teaching how they can get adults, which is sometimes a little bit hard probably for them because they're like child. But on the other hand, they also should have like a happy living in this moment.
Yes.
So like they should be like I think as a Tenzo you have a big responsibility in this point.
Yes.
Or you could be. And what you like how like I have an example. There was a time when we like after the meals we had often the leftovers. And this was probably like a lot of people like what we had this discussion with that took mayonnaise, and it was like a kind of second meal what they had. I'm still not really thinking that this was all just the ceremony we done here, but I 100% get the point of that this is more important. We should eat together. This is also like an adult thing. But for example, like we had this time, what I see right now after session when we like this was like it's really hard and intense, and this second eating we often had. This create like a very like everybody had to first talk together after the chanting and still had the second bowl of curry. But it's like then you would break the rule a little bit with, and you maybe let them a little bit more free time. You don't give them a hard teaching, or not a hard teaching, but maybe you open a little bit the space. Would you think this is a good, like a Tenzo should think about these moments too, and maybe make a little space open, or just this is just an example. Maybe you could find more, but also this little open the space is also important, or it's just
of course it's important. It's just that you should make sure that you open one spot and then it's all of this opens which can happen. So often it's easier to then for example discuss it and say like, yeah, we see the point in not having leftovers, but how about after session? And 3 o'clock is quite early. If people want to eat until 6 or so, why not make an exemption on session day, last day of session? Rather than always have people opening their individual holes whenever they think appropriate, but everybody has
Of course.
completely different ideas of the size of the hole, and especially when it's then happening behind other people's back, because they have, this person thinks there should be never any hole anywhere, but this person thinks, oh, and then you keep it a secret, and then there's only this amount of friends that are allowed through the hole, and so on and so on. But in general, yes, of course, I mean, as you said, people, if you're the Tenzo, you want them to be happy and have a good meal. And in the case of session, there's only 2 meals, and the session is over at 3. So yeah, people like to enjoy and to talk until in the evening, and there's still curry left over. Why not?
Like just was an example, like probably like I don't know, but sometimes you have the feeling, okay, now I see the people working outside, I would love to bring them some cookies, but maybe it's too much. And like I think to find the balance between just these meals, but also you can maybe sometimes when you find the right moment to do something more, or just like let them on the limit. But I think you answered the question.
Yeah. Like tomorrow rice planting is one of the traditional moments where the Tenzo comes there all the way down to the rice with whatever they could think of that makes the people there happy. So,
道長さんは30歳の時に安泰寺を初めて出た
33歳の時。
3歳の時ですね。最初6ヶ月ぐらいに、大阪でホームレスをしたそうですけど、でどういう経験でした？
もう毎日が楽しくて仕方ない。
本当？
はい。もう要するに自由ですから、ここは安泰寺も他のお寺と比べると比較的に自由なところもあるけれども、1年間のスケジュールが決まっている。今の安泰寺よりも休み時間も少なくて、夏の休みがないし、冬は3週間しかない。だからこの冬の3週間が終わるともう1年間はここにいなくちゃいけない。ヘッド文句になってしまうと、自分の失敗ばっかりじゃなくてみんなの失敗の責任はこちらにある。だからもう朝起きてから夜寝るまではその全体を見なくちゃいけない。夜寝ててもそれが気になってしょうがない。座禅しても畑のことが気になって、田んぼのことが気になって。だから自分の時間は全然ない。という錯覚を覚える。もちろんその時間こそ自分の時間なんだけれども、1日24時間自分の時間なんだけれども、いわゆる自由時間はない。で、ホームレスは1日24時間自由時間なわけで、何をやってもいい。で、朝2時間座禅したけれども、別にサボろうと思えばサボってもいいし、好きなことやれる。で、ホームレスだから公園から出て行けと言われたら出て行くしかしょうがないけれども、別のところに移ればいいと。大阪たくさん公園がありますから、長田公園だとか、東京の上野公園だとか、違うところに住めばいいと思って。だから本当にもう自由で。で、その頃はともみ、今の妻ともみとも知り合って、それもまたそれなりに楽しく、過ごさせてもらったんですね。ですから、もし私の師匠がタイミングで亡くなってなければ、最低でも3、4年間はやりたかったんですね。 もうずっと死ぬまでやってもよかったですね。もうとにかくもう楽しいです。はい。
テント。
はい、テントですね。はい。
じゃあ、どっかに違う公園に行きなさいって言われたらテントを。
そうそう、畳んで、移動して。はい。気楽ですよ。はい、他にありませんか？はい、なければこれで終わりたいと思います。長らくお疲れ様でした。主上無変性願道煩悩無尽性願断おもん無用性願学仏道無常性願上主上無変性願道煩悩